What's available to children in libraries has been the focus of American politics for over a year now. The American Library Association recorded 1,600 book challenges last year, as opposed to just 400 in 2017. The issue has finally reached Louisiana. Two lawmakers drafted bills that would limit a child's access to explicit content in public libraries. The goal is to give parents more discretion over what their children can and can't check out. But opposers say this is just the first step to censorship and book banning.
If those books weren't there, the library is a great place, isn't it? I've always loved the library when I had children. My kids ran free in the library while I tutored, you know.
Would they still do that today?
I wouldn't do that now.
Kitty Sibley Morrison is a teacher, and she's joining thousands of Americans advocating for a cleansing of public libraries.
Around the country, efforts to ban specific books or even whole categories of books are on the rise.
A recent study found hundreds of books, mostly focused on LGBTQ themes or racial issues, have now been forbidden across the country.
The focus is primarily on the children's section. Conservative politicians and organizations are rallying to limit a child's access to books with what they say is explicit content or adult themes. And support for the movement is growing. PEN America, a literature nonprofit, recorded over 1,600 book challenges during the 2021-2022 school year. 41% of the books were LGBTQ themed, 40% focused on person of color narratives, and 22% had some sexual content.
This topic transcends Christianity, and it transcends book banning. This is about protecting your children from obscenity.
According to PEN America, Louisiana is one of the few states without outright book bans, but people who share Kitty's viewpoint are organizing here too.
Based on what I've read on the St. Tammany accountability, there's, it's really, it's so vile that I don't even want to repeat the things that I've read. That's how bad it is.
The St. Tammany Library Accountability Project, the organization Kitty's referring to, posted a list of books they think are inappropriate for children.
This began a debate between parents and librarians across our state about how we can keep sexually explicit material out of the hands of children while still ensuring that librarians are able to promote healthy viewpoints within our public libraries.
Louisiana Attorney General and gubernatorial candidate hopeful Jeff Landry is also pushing for legislation that doesn't ban books, but still limits a child's access to certain titles. He compiled a list of books and excerpts, which I can't read for you here. Most have to do with sex, and the language can be graphic.
Let me be clear so that there is zero confusion. Nowhere in this report do we call for the censoring or banning of books. This is about what's appropriate for children. This is about giving parents the ability to control the information that their children see or have access to in public libraries.
Landry released a Protection of Innocence project, which lists his opinions with guidelines for concerned parents to use. It tells them how to write formal complaints to library boards. There's even a hotline to report them for keeping inappropriate books. It's not very popular with some librarians.
I mean, that's straight out of a dystopian novel.
Straight out of like the iron, Soviet times, with people like neighbors having like a way to snitch on their
neighbors,
on their community members.
Melanie Brevis and Lynette Mejia are co-founders of Lafayette Citizens Against Censorship. Their local libraries have been subjected to several complaints about the content of the books and who's reading them, leading to huge conflicts at local library meetings.
Your Honor, order the third time.
They're dividing things into what is safe and what is dangerous based on their own criteria.
By controlling that language and controlling, the words and how we describe these things, to me, that's one of the scariest things.
Both women say libraries already have systems in place to protect kids, which for the most part is true. Generally, a library director delegates library employees to filter through a variety of titles. They usually rely on professional review journals and publishing houses that designate age appropriateness and relevance.
Whether it be, magazines, newspapers, books, they're ordering them from respected publishers. And those books have already been vetted by editors, by, professional reviewers. They're written for an age-appropriate audience, whichever section of the library they end up in. So this idea that somehow there's all this awful stuff that is quote unquote inappropriate, it's just not true.
In fact, most of the books on Landry's list are marked for young adults around 15 to 18 years old.
Mr. Landry, these items that you were detailing in the report, were these pulled from the complaints that were made to your Protecting Minors tip line?
I believe, I couldn't answer that particular question, but we can find out if any of the material that's in there came from that tip line. We do know that this investigation into the public libraries had started before we opened up that line.
Both women say this is the first step to outright book bans. They're most afraid of statutes, more specifically 2 bills drafted by Senator Heather Cloud and Representative Julie Emerson. Their bills would create a library card system that indicates whether kids can check out books with explicit content or not. Depending on their parents' approval, they'd be given a library card with that specification.
You have to be very careful about this language, because there's a fine line between giving a parent actual control and then handing that control over to Jeff Landry or the Louisiana legislature.
It's a topic expected to be big this legislative session, whether these bills make it to the chamber floor or not. But regardless of what happens at the Capitol, the effort will persist.
But what's right is right and what's wrong is wrong,
On a radio show, Governor John Bel Edwards said this upcoming session is a fiscal-only session. Lawmakers can only bring up 5 non-fiscal bills. It's unclear if the 2 about library cards will make the cut.